So today is the last of our 11 movie reviews for the 11th of the 11th, which of course is tomorrow. I do hope that at the 11th hour you will be marking the day, even with a few moments worth of silence. The film that I've chosen today is a particularly important one because it's a film about how PTSD came to be recognized and seen, and the difficulties that people had during the First World War in determining what was wrong with these soldiers. It's the pioneering work of very few people that began to lead us to understand that shell shock was a psychiatric condition, a medical condition, something that people had no control over. This film, Regeneration, is one that tells that story, and that's the film I'm going to review today.
Welcome to Shattered the Podcast,
sharing the lived experience of mental illness on
A father,
a mother.
a family.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Okay, so today we're talking a film called Regeneration. It's a 1997 film. It came out. It's not widely known, but it's a very, very, very good film because PTSD is at the center of the story. So let's set the scene. It's World War One. Men are suffering in a way that very few men have suffered before, under excessive strain, illness, bombardment. World War One was a world-shattering event, and there were living, breathing men that were caught in the middle of it. As such, men's minds started breaking in ways that they hadn't broken before, or they hadn't been seen to be broken before, and in such numbers that it couldn't be ignored. Now, over 300 men were shot for cowardice in the face of the enemy, all of whom clearly suffered from shell shock, or what we now call as PTSD. These men were shot outright because the authorities wanted to maintain discipline, and they honestly thought that these men were just cowards. 309 men. 309. Just shot because their mind could not comprehend the horrors. So, the movie itself takes place in a war hospital at, I believe it's called Craig Lockhart. Craig Lockhart? I don't know. British probably say it Craig Lockhart or something. I don't know. But this was one of the first hospitals that was set up for people that were suffering from war weariness. However, it was only for officers. And it was interesting because officers back then were of a social class. So they were treated differently, but they were also treated in such a way that it really defies belief now. So the young man that ends up there, he can't talk. He's a young soldier, he's a lieutenant, but he's not a silver spoon guy. He's not from upper crust. He's a working class boy. And the problem that they have is that he is mute. Now, at the time, they thought that mutism as part of shell shock only happened to people of lower social orders. So for an officer to show up, even in a place where it was okay and they understood that there was this thing, they didn't call it mental illness at the time, but they knew that there was something medically wrong. But for this guy, who wasn't upper crust, his mutism was a mystery. Because officers, don't you know, don't suffer from mutism. They suffer from other things. The doctors at this hospital are starting to use psychoanalysis uh, instead of what they were using at other places, and we're going to talk about that in a second. And something that one of the main doctor called gentle miracles. The thought that men should talk about what they'd been through because it was helpful for the coping mechanism was something that people laughed in these doctors' faces. They thought it was ridiculous. So you've got this guy who's not upper crust. He's at this psychiatric hospital and they don't understand why he's mute. Now, into this story comes the poet Siegfried Sassoon, who has written something that has caused a bombshell in Britain because he's upper crust, he's a little bit well known, he's got a little bit of an audience, and he writes a letter, which is a soldier's letter against the war. It's got a proper title. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. This letter sent shockwaves because it was basically a man in the trenches saying, hang on, this war is not going the way that you think it is. And we are sending men to their death and dismemberment for no good reason. Fascinating, because it's all 100% true. Now, they couldn't decide whether they should shoot this guy for giving comfort to the enemy or firing him or what. They didn't know what to do. So they sent him to this mental hospital. He's clearly suffering some shell shock. He's a very heroic man. But he doesn't need to be in a mental hospital. But it's easier if the army can just claim, oh, he's going crazy, so that they don't have to admit that they are making massive errors in the battlefront, which they were. One of the key points of the movie is one of the head doctors, he starts getting what we now call PTSD. He doesn't understand it. He's never been in the front lines. And the thing is, we know that a psychiatrist, a psychologist needs to be aware of their own mental health because hearing the stories of others, being secondhand to these incidents can bring on PTSD symptoms. That's why all psychologists and psychiatrists have to have an overseeing therapist, somebody that they see fairly regularly just to make sure that mentally they're doing okay. So our good doctor at this sanitarium, this mental hospital, goes and sees another facility where the success rate is 100%. Every man that comes there gets cured of his shell shock and ends up going back into battle. Sounds like a claim that's too good to be true. And our good doctor, being a good doctor and hearing these wonderful reports, goes to a very, very different facility. And this one is for enlisted men. And the doctor in charge of this one has a very simple philosophy. These men are broken and they need to be fixed. And we need to fix them. The way that they treated the men that had mental illness is beyond deplorable. What they would do is they would inflict pain, electrodes, drowning, precursors to waterboarding, until these men with mutism that couldn't speak because of their mental illness, and I've been there, I haven't been mute, but I can get tongue-tied, or I know what I want to say, but I stutter. So essentially, this guy tortures men until they speak or get over their symptoms. One of the saddest things is before a man can go back to the front, he needs to go in front of the MO for a final clearance. And in that final clearance, the officer demands that they thank him for fixing him. They torture men, and then they make them thank them for the torture. It's barbaric. And this film does an amazing job of showing how far we've come and how revolutionary it was for people to understand that psychology isn't about torture, but it is an effective treatment for mental illness. It took hundreds of thousands of men to learn this. Hundreds of thousands of broken soldiers who were thrown into a battle that their officers did not understand or comprehend. And when they couldn't face up to the strain, the officers' response was to either kill or torture these men. Tomorrow is the 11th of the 11th. Mentioned before, 309 men were shot by the British government for cowardice. Men whose records clearly show they were suffering from shell shock. These men have all been exonerated, each and every one of them. Their honour is restored. Their families have received the medals that they were due. Their records have been cleared. But tomorrow, we can celebrate that, but can we understand the sacrifice that these men went through that they didn't even understand? They didn't know where they were going or why, and neither did their leaders. Tomorrow is an important day. And it's important because of those few words, lest we forget. We do it so that we won't forget. And there's so many special interest groups that are trying to carve out a piece for tomorrow. And I'm not asking you to do that. I'm not asking you to commemorate the mentally ill servicemen. I'm asking you to think of these men and women that came back from war broken, physically and mentally. Sometimes just mentally, sometimes just physically. I've heard it said that Anzac Day and Remembrance Day are jingoistic and celebration of Anzac culture. It's not. It's a chance for us to take 1 minute out of 1 day of 1 year to be silent, think of those that suffered, and to thank them, to let them know that they will not be forgotten. Regeneration is a film that is very, very worth watching. I think it was in America, it was released as Behind the Lines, something along that sort. It's well worth watching. For the diggers that are home, yes, tomorrow we are going to remember the dead. And well, we should. But at the same time, we remember you We remember your service. We remember the wars that we sent you to that now seem futile. We honour you for your service and we thank you sincerely. Hope everybody has a good Remembrance Day, and I hope that you take the opportunity to take a minute, just be silent, just to think of what others have given up for us. Have a great week. I will speak to you again on Monday. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to Shattered the podcast. I'd like to thank our producer, Meredith Brosnan, our executive producer, Torian Lau, and the band Adelaide for allowing us to use their song as our theme. Go to shatteredthepodcast.com for more information.